Well, hello and welcome back to the channel. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, and this is a breakdown of the discussion that I had with George Noory last Thursday night on Coast to Coast AM. We talked about reptilian gods, we talked about reptilian hominids, and we talked about shapeshifters. Now, and there's other, I usually link them up. You'll see that we've already had the discussion about the reptilian gods. We've already had the in-depth discussion about the reptilian hominids, or the three different hominids within the book of Genesis, the first chapter of the book of Genesis. And now I want to break down the discussion about shapeshifters, because it's one thing for me to go on Coast to Coast AM and tell millions of people that there's shapeshifters in the book of Genesis, in fact, shapeshifters in the Bible. But it's another thing for me to actually give you the source material, the chapter and verse, if you will, of where I find these shapeshifters in the Bible. So I feel like if I'm going to say these things, I at least owe you the courtesy of showing you where I get them from. And quite frankly, if you're going to take me to task and criticize me, then you owe me to at least look at and consider the sources that I raise. So that's what we're going to do. Super excited. Tremendous growth in the subscription and views on the channel. Keep it up. Keep subscribing. Keep liking. Keep sharing. Keep telling everyone you know about this show, this channel. And I have received several nice emails about people saying, I've never seen anyone do this on that Coast guest follow up and give the actual details of what they believe and the background and the support. And it's my pleasure to do so. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump into that. Let's look at the facts and the figures behind my assertion of shapeshifters in the Bible and in the book of Genesis. Okay, here we go. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower. Coast to Coast AM. I was just on last Thursday, and we're going to talk about shapeshifters, not only in Genesis, but in the entire Bible. The fact that there's shapeshifters in the Bible, and yes, I did say the fact that there's shapeshifters in the Bible, will come as a staggering, stunning surprise to most people. But I guarantee you that there are shapeshifters in the Bible, and we're going to start by showing you where those shapeshifters are. And this is something that most of you probably know, but you didn't think about it in terms of shapeshifting. Probably the classic shapeshifter in the Bible is Satan, aka Lucifer, aka the Lord. And you remember the scripture says, and no wonder, for Satan himself masquerades as an angel of light. And if we look at that actual verse, it does come from 2 Corinthians. I don't like to use Paul's, and I had to laugh because if you look at this, it says Paul and the false apostles. I've finally gotten through to a Bible Hub. They're admitting that Paul is a false apostle. Of course they're not, but it's just funny how that's set up. Paul and the false apostles. But this is actually not King James, so I'm going to go to King James so we can actually see it the way we are we're used to seeing it. And of course we got off into the wrong verse again. But here you go. And do not marvel, for Satan himself is transformed into an angel of light. And I know that I say it's Lucifer. I know I'd say that it's the Lord. I don't think many of you have trouble understanding that Satan and Lucifer are the same person. But this word Satan, Satan, really means adversary. And I've proven on several of my videos that the archenemy, the Satan, the adversary of the Christ, was and is the Lord, the being that we call the Lord. So really what we're talking about here is the Lord is transformed into an angel of light. Well, Jeff, you know, I'm with you, but not quite convinced. Remember that word transformed? We're going to go hit you with the interlinear, and I think you're going to be blown away with this. We're going to go to 2 Corinthians 11:14. And how can you use Paul's writings? Well, a good liar will always throw in a little bit of truth. And I will very rarely ever use anything that Paul wrote, but every now and then, it's just like they do today, the deceivers. They have to somehow, it seems like they've got some kind of a code that they actually have to throw in a little bit of truth. And every now and then Paul will throw in some truth. So Satan, Satan, and I know what do you mean it's the adversary? Well, this is what I mean. It's the adversary. And it says an adversary. Very, very, even in the research books, they're so blatantly, it's fake news. It's just like the media. They have such a prejudice, because if you look at this, they're saying an adversary. Ho Satanas. Ho Satanas. You know what ho is? Ho is a definite article. Definite article. So it means the adversary. It means the Satanas. What's a Satanas? Satanas is an adversary. So they very deceitfully, they very much without integrity or honor, want to say an adversary. Well, maybe I'm being a little bit too strong because this is a different word. But we know for sure that it is the adversary that's being talked about. So that's why I can say to you that it is the Lord that is in view here, because we're talking about the adversary. But what does the adversary do as we scroll back down to 14? I hope I'm not making you seasick. The adversary himself, the adversary, the main adversary, the big adversary of the Christ, is transformed into an angel of light. So we're going to go back up to the interlinear, and we're going to go to verse 14, and we're going to find out what this great adversary does. Satan, ho Satan, the adversary, masquerades as an angel of light. But what do you do when you masquerade? Let's start there. What do you do when you masquerade? You've been to a masquerade party. What do? I'll wait. You put on a mask, don't you? You change your appearance. So already right there, that's enough to convince the objective-minded scholar. But let's go. Meta-shematizo. Yeah, easy for you to say. But I want you to notice what it means. And I'll wait again. To change the outward appearance, to transfigure, to adapt, to shapeshift. That's exactly what it means. It means a metamorphosis. And in case you're not convinced yet, it means to change your outward shape. It means to change your outward appearance. Does the Christian whistleblower know what he's talking about? Or does the Christian whistleblower know what he's talking about? I'm giving you straight from the Bible, the Word, boom, putting it on you. Shape-shifting in the Bible. I don't make this stuff up. I know some of you think I do. I love it. This is the most fun that I have. So the Lord is definitely, without a doubt, a shape shifter. There is no question. The Lord is a shape shifter. Okay? Gee, wait a minute now. You're just getting a little bit carried away now. You're going to say that Jesus is a shape shifter? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. Alrighty then, y'all locked and loaded for this? Are you ready for this? Jesus as a shape shifter. We'll start in Luke chapter 4, verse number 30. He has just, the Christ has just cleansed this fellow in the synagogue. And then everybody in the synagogue was filled with wrath. They rose up, they took him out of the city, led him up to the brow of the hill, whereupon their city was built that they might cast him down headlong. So they grabbed him, they got hold of him, they're about ready to throw him over a cliff. But he, passing through the midst of them, went on his way. he either just dematerialized or he shapeshifted, so he was able to go in the midst of their way. And he shows up about 60 miles away within a matter of minutes in another synagogue. So not only did he shapeshift, he teleported, he teleported himself. So yes, the Lord shapeshifted. Jesus shapeshifted. We also have in John 10:39. Well, let's just take a look at it, because I know this is crazy stuff for you guys. And you're like, how in the world is this crazy fool telling us this stuff? How can it be true? And yeah, but it is, and I know it's bothering some of you, but John 10:39, the Jews took up stones against him. He says, hey, for which one of those good things are you stoning me? Therefore they sought again to take him, but he escaped out of their hand. Verse 39, let's look at the interlinear there. Let's see what they're actually talking about in verse 39, because that makes it sound like he, ran away. But in 10:39, but he just went forth out of the hand of them. They're ready to kill him again, and somehow he just is able to just stroll away, to just get out of their way and just walk away. This is supernatural, folks. You can't just walk away from a group of people that are about ready to kill you. You just can't do it. And then, of course, in the book of John, chapter 20, let's look at that. John chapter 20 and verse number, we'll look at verse number 15. And this is after the resurrection. Mary Magdalene, who knew the Christ better than anybody else, she said she didn't know that it was him. She thought he was the gardener. She thought he was the gardener. Matthew talks about people men walking with him after the resurrection, and they didn't know it was him. So not only did, and I'm going to break this down, you don't know what I mean unless you've been listening. Not only did the Christ shapeshift, Jesus also shape-shifted. And of course, when we go to the classic one in Matthew chapter 17, what happened in Matthew chapter 17? He was transfigured before them. This is the Christ transfigured before them. Let's look at what it means in verse number 2 there. What does transfigured mean? And he was... Come on, man. And verse number 2. Oh, guess what? It's that same word again. Do you remember that word? He metamorphosed, and he changed his outward form. Shape-shifting. Jesus was a shape-shifting. Oh, God, I love it when a plan comes together. It's just so much fun to be the best in the world at what you do. I can't, there it is. People are like, no way possible, you can't. It's what I do, folks. Don't try this at home. No, do try it at home, because you're able to do this at home just the same way I am. Shapeshifters on Coast to Coast AM. Satan, Lucifer, the Lord, shapeshifter. Jesus and the Christ, shapeshifters. The Elohim are shapeshifters. Well, how do you know the Elohim were shapeshifters? Well, you remember back in the book of Genesis, not the book of Micah, but the book of Genesis. Made me think of Micah Hanks, my buddy. But in the book of Genesis, we read, I think it's in Genesis chapter 2, where the gods would come down in the cool of the day and would talk with man. And we know that the gods, the Elohim, are spiritual beings, for sure. But we also know that they would come down and talk with them in the cool of the evening. And I can't find where it is right now, but you know they came down and talked to him in the cool of the evening. They said, "Hey, who told you you was naked?" Now, I'm in the South. It's naked down here. It may be naked where you are, but we say, "Buck naked." So the Elohim were shapeshifters. The Elohim were spiritual beings. And, of course, the Christ was an Elohim. So it makes perfect sense that he could shapeshift. The Lord, Lucifer, Satan, was a former Elohim. So it makes perfect sense that he could and can shapeshift. Do you see how this all makes sense? You see how this all comes together? The Christ, a shapeshifter, because he's an Elohim. The Lord, a shapeshifter, because he was a former Elohim. Jesus, because that's really the Lord's fake masquerade, his foe, because he is the Lord. Jesus is the Lord, and it's another Elohim who is a shapeshifter. So the Elohim were all shapeshifters. The Elohim were all capable of shape-shifting. And this is where it really gets interesting. This is where it really gets interesting. Not that it hasn't been interesting yet, but it really gets interesting when you start talking about the majestic serpents. Because they were shapeshifters too. And if you remember, back in Genesis chapter 1, the blah, 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 the majestic serpents were created in verse 21. And God, the Elohim, created the great whales, which you've already seen from the Greek means the majestic serpents. And then it wasn't down here until 27 that man was created. So there's a difference of 6 verses, and I've often asked myself, and I often ponder, how much time passed in those 6 verses? It must have been a long time that passed in those 6 verses. And because we were created in the image of the Elohim, we're able to, we have that shape-shifting ability within ourselves. And many of us today are finding out that we can leave this body. Many of us are finding out that we can get out of this body. I don't know of anyone that's been able to shape-shift as yet, like the Christ did. But it's coming. If the need would ever arise, it's coming. And not only could we do it, but the majestic serpents could do it. And I'm convinced that the majestic serpent actually did it, and that was part of his pitch to make the woman fall for his temptation to them. And I'm going to show you why I think it's true. And I'm going to show you why I got it nailed. And again, you know better. You know better than to mess with me. You know better than to say, "Oh no, it's impossible, it can't be true," because you know I'm getting ready to show you. So here it is, the serpent, right? The majestic serpent, standing upright. We've already talked about this. A humanoid reptile, in the fact that he was bipedal. He was fully reptile, but he was a hominid reptile. That's a better term. And then what it says here, this is the key, that for the Elohim knows that the day that you eat of the fruit thereof, and if you get Serpents and Doves, and I'm going to have to go into a series on this, if you get the book Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods, it's $1.99 right now for the ebook, and we're selling tons of them after Coast to Coast, which is great. Or you can get the paperback for $19, and I'll link that up, both of those in the bottom. You will see that the forbidden fruit was not a forbidden fruit, but the Hebrew says that it was the words of a being in the garden. So what the woman fell for was not a forbidden fruit, but it was the words of the serpent, and I've proven that without a doubt, just like I do everything else in the book Serpents and Doves in the Garden of the Gods. And what he says is, look at that in verse 5. Your eyes will be open, you will be just like the gods. So that's Genesis 3:5. Let's go to the interlinear and see what that says. Genesis 3:5. And it says, your eyes will be opened, and you will be as the gods. You will be as the Elohim. You will be like a divine being. You will have all of the attributes and the abilities of the Elohim. And the snake, the serpent, was pitching to her, hey, look, if you will just follow what I'm saying, if you'll just follow what I'm telling you to, I will make you just like the gods. You will be able to come into those bodies like they do. You will be able to go into spirit. She probably was spirit at that time. You'll be able to take on a bodily form just like they can. And there's a reason why there's this whole mythos around the fact that the original sin was having sex. And I've always rejected that. But brother and sister, it was probably part of it, because he's saying this, the majestic serpent saying, and not only can you come down into this body and experience all the cool stuff, but there's this thing called sex, and woo-wee! These spirits today still want to be in our bodies so they can have sex. And the serpent used this on Eve and said, hey, look, hubba, hubba, ding, ding. It was the first woman that didn't know a line when she heard one. And the serpent closed her. And she went into, this is also in Serpents and Doves, she went into the fake body that the Lord had made. And we've been stuck in them ever since. So the majestic serpents are better at shape-shifting than we are, because they've been doing it longer. And the majestic serpents have never been stuck in mud bodies like we are. They never gave themselves into these bodies like we have. So David Icke may not be as crazy as I once thought he was. So we know that the Lord shapeshifts. We know that the Christ shapeshifts. We know that Jesus shapeshifts. We know that the majestic serpents shapeshift. So we know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, there are shapeshifters in the Bible, and certainly shapeshifters in the book of Genesis. So, if you heard George and I on the broadcast, we had a little discussion about, this idea of reptilian shapeshifters being in places of power, Queen of England, all of that stuff, George Bush and Donald Trump and all this idea of the elite being shapeshifters. And we both had to admit, you know what? We can't say, oh yeah, David Icke is right, but we can't. I'm a lot less incredulous than I was a month ago. And George said, you know what? It is possible. I have to agree with him. What Icke says about reptilian shapeshifters is possible. The reptilian beings have been shapeshifting much longer than we have. We still can't really do it yet. And they were already adept at doing it 6,000 years ago. So how good have they got at doing it by now? So it is possible. Am I saying that all of the, Taylor Swift and everybody's, I think somebody even made a video that I was a reptilian shapeshifter. So, is everybody that's been called a reptilian shapeshifter a reptilian? No. But it is possible, and we should have our eyes and minds open to the fact, and maybe we should turn on our spiritual intuition a little bit more so we can look at people and maybe give them a second look. I read auras, so I might have to start looking for scales. I don't mean to make it silly, but it's something to think about. It's definitely something to think about. So there you have it. Shapeshifters in Genesis on Coast to Coast AM. Once again, subscribe to this channel. Tell people about this channel. Call your favorite TV shows, your favorite, the ones that do interviews, your favorite radio shows, your favorite podcasters. Say, hey, man, get this crazy Jeff Daugherty on the show. He's always fun to listen to. And if you get a chance, send an email to George at Coast to Coast and say, hey, thanks for having Jeff on. Have him back again real soon. Like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm Jeffrey Daugherty, the Christian Whistleblower, here to help you unwind your mind and to unindoctrinate yourself.